Thank you for listening to the Following Films podcast. As the world continues celebrating the 75th anniversary of Peanuts, Lee Mendelson Film Productions has given fans a treasure, the first ever release of Vince Guaraldi's complete soundtrack to You're a Good Sport, Charlie Brown. Following the sellout success of the premiere Zoetrope LP, demand has been so overwhelming that a second pressing is already on the way, along with an eco-black vinyl edition arriving September 12th. At the heart of this project is producer Sean Mendelson, who along with his brother Jason has worked tirelessly to bring Guaraldi's timeless jazz back to life in pristine form. With restored and remastered recordings, expanded liner notes, and an eco-conscious approach to vinyl production, this release isn't just about preserving a classic soundtrack, it's about honoring a legacy. Today we sit down with Sean Mendelson to talk about the eco-black vinyl release, Guaraldi's genius, and what it means to carry forward in his father Lee Mendelson's enduring Peanut legacy. Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Google Workspace. We keep things running smoothly and efficiently at Following Films, with the convenience of cloud-based Google Workspace programs. Google Docs lets you work and save on Google Drive, Hangouts lets you video chat, Gmail gives you a professional email, and Calendar lets you organize, from anywhere at any time. You should try it and see how it can help your business too. Google Workspace is offering a 14-day free trial, and if you sign up using my link, I can give you a discount, and it helps to support the show. You can check the show notes for a direct link. Now on to my conversation with Sean. I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. Is that an Amoeba shirt that you're wearing?
Yeah, we just did, and I don't know if this is, I either gave my son the exclusive one to San Francisco. It does say San Francisco on it. Maybe that. We did a little talk and a signing in last month with the release of You're a Good Sport, Charlie Brown, Zoetrope, and we had all of our albums there, and we had no idea what to expect because it's the first time we went to a record store as a record label and as the producers of these albums. And there was a lot of young people, and that was a really heartening, exciting thing because I've said since the beginning, one of my goals as a person curating this and working on this was to get young people to Vince Guaraldi and to jazz. So yeah, I'm repping Amoeba Music San Francisco. Hopefully we'll be working with them and their other stores in the future.
I've only been to the Los Angeles location, but I do love that one on Hollywood Boulevard. It's one of my favorite record stores in the country. Great place.
They've been very nice to us, putting pictures up and what have you. And so we're hopefully going to end up down there at some point too in the future.
That's great. So how did you become involved with this record? Because I think we're about the same age. I'm 48, we're going to be 49. And I've never not known Peanuts as a part of my life. So this has got to be kind of just like a wish fulfillment for you to be involved in a project like this.
So to be very clear, yeah. Chris, it's nepotism. It starts at nepotism because my father is Lee Mendelson, and he created a Charlie Brown. And I appreciate you asking the question in a vacuum, so you didn't lead the witness a little bit. But yeah, so I have three siblings, but when I started out in life, I wasn't into Peanuts like people aren't into what their parents do.
Of course.
It took me. I just turned 45, so yeah, we are about the same age. My older brother, is 47, and it took me right up until my dad passed. My dad passed away on Christmas morning of 2019, which is appropriate in one way because he liked to talk about serendipitous things in his life, and obviously the most famous thing he probably did was getting Sparky Charles Schultz to put Charlie Brown Christmas on television.
Right.
My dad's been producing those shows from the inception all the way up until 2016, and he made a bunch of documentaries. And in the last few years of his life, I spent more time with him one-on-one than I ever did in my whole life. During that period, he would talk about how, because we're the publishers of Vince Guaraldi's music, Lee Mendelson Film Productions, and he said, the action, as it were, is in the music. And then with that, my brother Jason brought it to my attention that we were going to try and put out some of these albums, and we were trying to find the tapes during COVID. And so the two main catalysts from my perspective were Concord put out a 2018 It's a Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, but it had all the sound effects. It was not great fidelity, and it was not great. I remember bringing it up to my two brothers, who are the co-presidents of Lee Mendelson Film Productions, before I was actively working there. I said, "You guys, this isn't, I don't think this is what you guys thought it was." And so subsequently the first thing we released, and not as a record label, but with Kraft or Concord, as it were, was It's a Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, and the pumpkin shaped thing, which, by the way, they're making a white one that I'm excited about through Target, and they're doing a few other ones
Cool.
in the future. But we just started to start our own record label, and in the last two years, we've put out 6 more Peanuts soundtracks. And so I'm carrying on the legacy of my father, working with my brother alongside him as the producers of these albums, curating it. We look at it as we're stewards for this music. And so it's been a real joy for me.
Well, it's something that it was a leading question, but it's something that goes deeper than nepotism, because there's something that is, you can get your way in the door perhaps, but to turn out a piece of work like this, the care that went into this, that's not just a cynical act. That's something that clearly shows heart. So I do think that you could have failed in an attempt if it was simply based on nepotism.
Glad you said that, because this is our, as a newfound record label, my brother and I, this is our exclusive artist. It's Vince Guaraldi playing Peanuts music at present, right? So all of our time and energy goes into making these things as good as it can for the fans. And it is, like you said, it's because my brother and I grew up listening to this music. My dad, actually, at Vince's funeral, he died at 47, unfortunately. Right. He was on KRON or KPIX outside the funeral, and he said, obviously his music carries on, but more than losing him as a professional partner, he was a closer friend. And so my dad always loved Vince Guaraldi's music from the moment he suggested it to Schultz to be the background music for these specials. And I'm a musician. I've become a musicologist specifically of this, and it's in the liner notes and what have you. Yeah. So I really feel great connection to it. And I wanted to point this out. The first thing I got back was that we had these audio proofs. And I've learned so much trial and error over these last 2 years about vinyl, because I grew up on CDs in the 80s. Now my teenage kids who are right here, they grow up on vinyl now, because obviously it's the resurgence, Yep. The first audio proof I got back in July or August of 2023 for Charlie Brown Thanksgiving sounded terrible. It had pops and cracks. I said, I don't know much about vinyl yet, but I know this ain't right. And I lost sleep over it, because like you said, my reputation is on the line, but also I'm connected to my father's legacy and Vince's legacy in one respect. So I literally lost a couple nights of sleep. But the company at the time, that manufacturer said, and we didn't communicate it well. We said, we need this quick. And they said, we thought you wanted it quick over the fidelity. Of course, the audio sources aren't good. But it turns out a week later, on a leap of faith, they sent us another copy that said, it always starts out bad. I'm like, I'm just supposed to take you at your word. But it all worked out, because we're now on our 7th iteration. And I'll show you this. This hasn't come out yet. This comes out in October.
Oh, that's beautiful. A picture disc.
This is our second picture disc with Barnes & Noble, who was a great partner of ours.
Oh, that's great.
On September 26th is the street date for this, and a yellow jelly bean. We're on our 3rd jelly bean with Record Store Day Essentials. So these are the things that I'm proud of, because obviously it's making the impression on the fans like it does on us.
Well, I write, and so I love to listen to music while I write, and I listen to a lot of classical music. I listen to jazz. I'll listen to film scores. And the Vince Guaraldi stuff, it's so perfect, because it's something that is, it's so easy to lose yourself in it and to paint so many other pictures beyond what you see in Peanuts. Of course, it'll take you back to that, and it has those sort of memories for me personally, as it does for a lot of other people. But there's this honesty in the music. Even though it's in a children's program, it has this melancholy, all of his stuff. It goes into minor chords when you wouldn't expect it to be in minor. And it's just, it has this, it's not darkness beneath it, but there's always this like lack of whimsy in it, which is just so brilliant. And it feels like a really honest representation of childhood.
Exactly. And that's the same sort of critical thinking that people put towards Schultz's comic strips and the specials. And so indelibly, these two things are simpatico. They're connected, right? The music is can be described in exactly the same way as the pathos of the show. Innocence and then a deeper complexity. So it's not, and that's the thing. When my dad suggested to Sparky to do jazz, Schultz was more of a classical connoisseur, and most cartoons or animated shows at the time would use, super fast classical, like Looney Tunes types music or whatever like that. So it was a kind of new thing to lean into jazz, which again does have, what I like about it, specifically Vince Guaraldi, is it has accessible melodies often, and then really rich textured chords. And that's what makes jazz special. And that's what brought 1965 all the way to now. If you watch Charlie Brown Christmas, sometimes it's your first, as a child, your first experience with jazz. You go, what is that type of music? And then if you're a jazz head, you go off and you do go deeper into Vince or go deeper into jazz. And so you're right. I think it's multiple things at once, and it's okay to be sad. And I write children's music, and I take it to heart too, because I don't like pandering or like talking. It seems to talk down to a child when you only assume that one happy do emotion to a musical score. And Vince was happy to go everywhere, just like he would on a gig for adults at a jazz club.
Well, one of the things that you do on here, which I really love on this release, is showing the multiple themes of the theme of the piece. And so you have 4 different versions on the B side of it. And so when I think it's 4, if I'm remembering correctly without it in front of me. Right. And so when you see that on jazz records a lot, where there'll be these variations on a theme, where they'll kind of go back and deconstruct and review it and kind of go through. And it gives it, when as a listener, it's just always so fascinating to go back and hear that. You don't see that in soundtracks a lot, to give that space to something. And you don't see it in the soundtracks to a kid's show ever, that kind of thing. And it is presented in the way that you would present a jazz record. It's the way you would present a Coltrane record. That you're going to have, this is the variations on this going through, and you learn about the creative process and how you can take the same idea and deconstruct it and recontextualize, and you can give it this wholly different vibe each time. And I love that about this.
It's my favorite thing, what you just referenced about this experience, because once we took the music away from the show, the dialogue, the sound effects, and we analyzed it, I specifically was looking at it from Vince Guaraldi history, what was going on in the world, the artistry of repurposing a theme. It's its own thing, right? Because a Charlie Brown Christmas are 5 and 6 minute pieces of jazz, which is more traditionally a length of a jazz piece of music on any album, right? But these are sometimes, and to some people's chagrin, when they first hear it, 30 seconds, minute and a half, and it was not meant to be released. It was always meant to be with the show, but it wasn't until this song, Woodstock Dreams, a 3-minute version on It's the Easter Big of Charlie Brown, came up, when I turned to my brother and I said, this song is not background music. And then I started listening to this music from another perspective, and just hearing, and I would say the best version of Vince's repurposing a cue is the 9 of Heartburn Waltz on Be My Valentine, Charlie Brown, the album that precedes this, Good Sport. It came out chronologically prior to it as well. I think it was beginning 1975. And he manages to use this beautiful lyrical unifying theme in 9 different ways, and each one represents some different part of your soul, different part of the arrangement musically, even if you're just looking at it from a heady perspective. And so the experience, we were a little nervous when we released these that people wouldn't appreciate the shortness of the cues. But there's still something to it, because it followed the story of the show and what people remember from watching the show, perhaps. But there's also enough variety that it even though it's a little ADD going from one track to the next, I think it holds the listener's attention because it's always showing you something new.
Well, it's that moment where I'm sitting in this chair, and this is where I generally will listen to music. If I'm listening to a record, I sit in my office and I'm listening to something. And if I'm writing, every once in a while, it's just something starts catching me. And when I was on the B side of this record, I kind of pull back from the desk for a little bit and just let these different things go through and just kind of start enjoying the record and listening to music actively instead of as a passive thing, which is something that I go through both, where I will actively pay attention to music and just have it as background. And this is something that you can do either one of those with, which is a great compliment to the work here.
I should point out that you have the You have the black, the
I
eco,
do. Yes,
right?
the black eco.
And why that's relevant is when everyone went crazy for our Zoetrope and it sold out very quickly, we already had 3 pressings in a short time for this. The scenes come to life on the Zoetrope, and now we have a Charlie Brown Christmas. They just released that. I don't know if you saw a couple of days ago as of recording this. My brother and I also were able to work on that a little bit with Drew Tetz, this great artist. It's the black one sounds amazing. The fidelity is, and then what's exciting for me is that it's made out of recycled materials from the factory floor.
Yeah.
I'm a big sustainable guy, and I'm really excited where the vinyl industry is going in the manufacturing perspective. And the audiophiles, like such as yourself, are able to appreciate what we want the listener to hear. So obviously it goes through all these processes before it gets to the customer. You obviously hope it doesn't get scratched or break or whatever. And we're really happy with all of our records. This being our 6th element, Lee Mendelson Film Productions, release, at how even when we're trying to make it sustainable, it is the highest fidelity. It comes from 192 kilohertz source tapes that we found. And we're so fortunate that they're 50 and 60-year-old tapes that are somehow magically preserved and very little ground noise and all the other stuff that gets in there. And we're very fortunate to have this guy, Vincent Hudson, mastering all the ones we've done, including Great Pumpkin with Kraft. And he'll be doing anytime we release a Vince Guaraldi score in the future, this guy's mastering it. And he's like a mad scientist, making it perfect for Peanuts, jazz fans, Guaraldi's fans, everybody in between.
So to illustrate the point, I had this record on, and my wife walked in. She's like, "Oh, you're listening to jazz." It didn't strike her that I was listening to Peanuts music. It was just, "Oh, you have a jazz record on. What are you up to? What are you doing right now that this is the music you want to listen to?" Because it's, depending on the mood, it's, what will I put on? If it's something that I'm trying to get into a darker place, I'll put on something aggressive. And if I'm trying to get something quiet and thoughtful and introspective. So what are you writing now that you're putting on this music? But could you also talk a little bit about the choice of 33 versus 45 for the record?
So one of the fun things as a curator, it's one of the biggest challenges for my brother Jason and I who produce these albums, is giving a appropriate product to the consumer. And in the case of this one, Good Sport specifically, and it was a short summer Charlie Brown 1969's mono master, which is the most swingiest big brass version of any Peanuts theme anywhere. The reason both of those are 45 is because we had less material to fill. So as a result, we said, well, if we have less material, what can we do? And being new to vinyl, we're like, oh yeah, we can have a higher resolution, as it were, fidelity-wise, for the listening experience. So this one and there'll be more in the future that are 45s as well. The both the black and the Zoetrope Good Sport are 45s, and it's not lost to me as I've become really listening to my record player how much you can hear the highs and all the stuff you always said. The highs are cleaner, the lows are cleaner, you're everything in between. And so we're just happy to be able to present Guaraldi. And the best thing we've been hearing from the press is that it sounds like it was recorded yesterday,
This does not sound like 50-year-old tapes that are being it doesn't have sometimes you'll hear things where it's obviously been put through some AI machinery and it just has this thing that sounds slightly off. And I mean, this sounds
no AI here. We're proud of it.
Which is great. I mean, if my ear's not that good, so eventually it'll get to a point where I won't be able to tell, I'm sure. But I swear to God, there's something that you can hear in production where I don't know how you can pinpoint it, but you can hear cynicism and you can hear where it's just, this is a thing that we're just throwing out there and people will buy it because this is on it. And you can hear when people's heart is in it and you can hear the heart in this.
And that's the big deal is we're honoring this man who meant so much to our father and to my brother and I. And so when the first reviews came back on the Thanksgiving 6 albums ago, we felt such relief. And then we felt confident. We went from like, should we even do this? Do people care? I mean, obviously Peanuts is popular, but will they buy the albums? And the answer is yes. And we're so lucky because in April of last year, we only made 1,000 of those short summers, for example, for Record Store Day last year. Yeah. And we were in over our heads because they picked us alongside Olivia Rodrigo and the Beatles as the top 10. Billboard magazine picked the top 10 R&B things out of like 350, 400 albums. And we were stunned because we're looking at all the inventory, like the Beatles, of course, 5,000 copies, Talking Heads, 6,000. And we had this measly 1,000. So our first round of hate mail was, you guys didn't make enough. And so we learned that lesson quickly. And now we just seem like we can't make enough. We're making,
it's a good problem. That's a wonderful problem to have.
Exactly. And the eggs, we had these eggs for Record Store Day this year. They're like selling, unfortunately, for $300 on eBay. They were $22 priced. We hoped as many fans would get them as possible before they get gouged on the second markets or whatever. But these are all things that are part of the problem. But, you roll with it and you try to learn and adapt.
I think most people like me that are vinyl buyers, we've all made that mistake one day of looking at something and saying, I'll get this next time I'm here. I'm going to put this back and I'm going to get this other one. It's not there. And then you look on eBay and you're like, oh, that's now 5 times the cost.
It's
if
crazy.
I'm lucky.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, certain things you just keep alerts for. And if it ends up getting out there at a good price, and then you wait 3 years and suddenly it's re-released again. And so it ends up working out. So
our whole edict is, as long as people want this, we're going to keep putting more of it out. And that's the thing, the supply and demand of it all.
So next up is Thanksgiving. Is there one that's coming down the pike after that?
I should point out, first of all, the one you have comes out technically, the street date is September 12th. The Zoetrope, the Black Eco is coming up September 12th. On September 26th, we have a Charlie Brown Christmas, which again we were associated with by proxy with the Zoetrope and the variations.
I made that mistake. Yes.
Yes. There's a white pumpkin, like I said, from Target, which comes out. Let me see here. It comes out August 29th. But on September 12th, the Christmas Zoetrope comes out. And then on top of the picture disc Barnes & Noble, we have yet another, as I briefly mentioned earlier, Record Store Day Essential Yellow Jelly Bean. It's hard to keep track of all this because initially I was resistant to the variants, but now I'm realizing the absolute value that people want them. We should give the people what they want. And then after that, all I can say is I think we're at a happy clip of 2 or 3 of these a year going forward, these soundtracks, as much as people continue to purchase them. I'm not allowed to say what's happening next year. I'm really excited, though, because we have everything lined up for next year, and I think the fans are going to go ape because next year is the 75th year since Vince Guaraldi recorded his first album in 1951. It's also 50 years after he passed away, recording It's Arbor Day, Charlie Brown. He was the night of that recording session. He was in Menlo Park, California, right near where he recorded the special. And between sets, he suddenly, tragically, again, at 47, passed away. And he would have done so much more with his career after that. But we're going to be celebrating next year. I keep using the term the Guaraldi Renaissance. So hopefully all next year, we're going to be celebrating Guaraldi like they celebrated the 75th of Peanuts this year. We're going to make it a Guaraldi banner year next year.
Well, I think that a lot of people, myself included, picked up the vinyl Christmas record and started recontextualizing this music, that we started listening to it for its own terms outside of it, that we always knew that there was something really beautiful about it. But I think that it just really opened those floodgates of listening to this on its own and just and kind of analyzing the art as its own thing.
So I was mentioning how it was the artistry of repurposing. The other thing that came to light, as I kind of briefly mentioned with Short Summer, is every one of these soundtracks is unique. It's more unique than I would have ever given it credit for had I not looked at it separate from the show. Yeah. So the funk and these sidemen, Mike Clark and Seward McCain. Mike Clark was a funk master at the beginning of funk, 1973, from Oakland. He was part of what's called the East Bay Sound, him and the drummer from Tower of Power, David Garibaldi.
Oh, wow.
And these two guys are the pioneers. And he was 20, I want to say 23, 24 when he met Vince. He was about 45 at the time. In the it was either 1969, early 70s. They gigged a lot before Mike Clark went on to Herbie Hancock and all these other folks. And so I was the first person I met, and we've been very fortunate to meet these guys, was Mike Clark on a Zoom during COVID. And the guy was so full of life. He painted a picture of Vince, and it was so cool because I got to play him Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. He goes, I'm not going to remember any of this. And then all these pictures, visceral things started coming back 50 years prior. And so that album is funkified. It's the most funky version of Charlie Brown, or excuse me, Linus and Lucy, because because Vince wasn't afraid, like maybe not many of his contemporaries were afraid of embracing what was new and what was interesting. And so Vince is taking on funk with 1973's Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. In 1972, I forgot to mention, he starts layering 3, 4, 5 keyboards to create You're Not Elected, Charlie Brown, which is my favorite soundtrack. It's the most dynamic. It's got blues, Dixieland, pop, far out jazz. He's got stuff in 5/4 asymmetrical, key signatures. And then he starts getting into ARP synthesizer with Be My Valentine and Good Sport. Be My Valentine is more of like a pad in the background. It's this violin sounding instrument. And then he's got a whole synthesized orchestra where he's now playing the violin. It sounds like he's playing a trumpet.
Yeah.
And Seward McCain, who played bass all through the 70s, was a jazz fusion expert. So you hear that implication on these soundtracks will help shape some of the ones in the 70s. And you really get to trace the history of Guaraldi through these scores that came out once or twice a year.
Well, it's, you listen to this, and I've seen all the specials, but haven't thought about listening to music on its own for a lot of these. And I list the final track on it comes on, and that hi-hat, that rolling hi-hat it's ending on, it sounds like the theme to Shaft almost. It has this like thing to it, the way that it's starting.
You should point out, just for clarity, you're talking about Good Sport, right?
Yeah.
So the last 4 tracks, you may already know this, weren't from the show. And speaking of which, when we were talking about the 33 versus 45, we found it was an industrial documentary about bicycles that my dad worked on as a producer, and Vince did the score for it. And it was right around that same period. And we thought bicycles, we thought motocross from the show, they fit together. And so what I like about these 4 bonus tracks, and like that one you just mentioned with the hi-hat, it has Seward McCain on bass, by the way, but it has, instead of Mark Rosengarten, it has Glenn Cronkite on drums. He goes back to his roots and he plays acoustic. And for me, and I'll be straight honest with you, this particular soundtrack is a little too of its time for my taste, a little too synth for me personally, but it gives me a little respite, those last 4 tracks, because you go back to sort of the traditional Vince acoustic piano sound, even though it's still up in some cases. There's a ballad on there as well. And one of the lessons I've learned from this is everybody has their different tastes. We've sold, when we have all 6 available at like an event like the Amoeba San Francisco, Barnes & Noble, we did a local event, or we went to the Fan Fest, Beagle Fest for the Peanuts fans. People would buy different ones. So every other person might have, You're Not Elected, or it's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown. On that one is a classical one. And with Ozzy Osbourne passing away, there's a really like heavy metal based thing, because metal, they say, was invented in like 70, 71 with Black Sabbath. But here we are 2 years later, and Vince just picked up a guitar and starts playing this psychedelic bass line rock on his guitar. And it's called Snoopy and Woodstock on that album, and it juxtaposes what's mostly Bach, Beethoven, even the Easter theme, which is a theme that's classical in nature that Vince wrote for that. I'm sorry, I tend to digress, Chris, because
no, it's great. It's great. Well,
so much.
That's what I love about those last 4 tracks. Is it kind of starts pulling all the worlds together, and it makes it feel, it contextualizes everything. It kind of wraps everything up in the album, and it's just such a wonderful ride to go on for me personally, that I love how of its time that it is, because I like having time capsules. I like having moments that you can go back to, with distance, it becomes appreciation. I think during the 80s, the last thing I wanted to hear was pop synthesizer. Now I have enough distance from it that I kind of have a newfound appreciation for it. So,
and this is what's really important to note, is that this ARP string synthesizer that's all over this album and all over Be My Valentine was only on the market, released, and minimally released to the artist mostly, in October of 1974. So 2 months later, he's recording with it and taking these risks. And Sly and the Family Stone was one of the first mainstream artists that used a drum machine with I think it was In Time, might have been Family Affair, with a drummer. And Vince did it on this. I don't know if you noticed that on the first track, on the track 3 of side A is You're a Good Sport, Charlie Brown, the main theme song. And he has Mark Rosengarten doing a drum track and a brand new Rhythm Ace drum machine that, again, was just new on the market. And he's laying down and including that drum machine in the soundscape. So this, and you talk about time capsule, this is very much 1975, and there's nowhere else that you'll hear Vince Guaraldi like this anywhere on recording. So it's a pleasure to hear how far he pushed himself.
And those synthesizers at that time were wildly expensive. Like those things were insane. You think you could go pick up a Casio. They would have this. It could have the same capability, perhaps wouldn't have the same sonic ability, whatever. But it was like they were like $40,000 or something like
I
that. They
was
were,
not aware of that, and that adds a whole other level of lore to what he was doing.
at least from what I've heard. I'm not 100%. That's I've heard things like that talking about certain recording equipment that they were, first introducing, like when Pink Floyd first started using stuff and how insanely expensive it was and all those kinds of things. But yeah, it's just.
It might have been a situation where it was just an instrument sitting around at
in a recording studio. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's possible because he was at a very, well tracked studio, Hyde Street in San Francisco, and which is now, it was Wally Hyder, and now it's Hyde Street in San Francisco. It's still there, 50 years later. And when we took Mike Clark in there, he's like, "Oh, everything is exactly where I remember it, man." And he's talking about this stuff, and so. They happen to have, we had David Benoit doing something as a bonus track for the Easter one. They happen to have a Fender Rhodes there, a piano. Who knows how many great players have played that over the years and what the value is on those, Well,
that for it sitting in that room adds something totally different to it.
Yeah.
It's almost objects sometimes to me. I'm not a spiritual person, but I feel like they can contain memories to some degree where there can be that thing that you can feel tapped into something.
I think that counts. I don't say you're not a spiritual. I'm a spiritual person for exactly that reason. I think music and things in nature are, the things that profoundly move through my spirit. And I feel like I guarantee I felt this magic, this alchemy when we were in that studio we had Mike Clark and Stuart McCain. 50 years later, they hadn't seen each other in 50 years after they toured regularly in the 70s. And I kind of sketched out this medley for them, and it was a pipe dream of mine. And then David Benoit played all the Vince Guaraldi parts, who's a torch for Vince. And we put 5 tracks together that spanned 4 different Guaraldi scores. So that was real treat for me, a real honor.
It's really incredible. It's something that I'm so excited that this is just getting going in many ways, that we have all this, because I'm a greedy American consumer and I want more of these. So I'm excited that I get to look forward to.
We're thankful for you and anyone else who's as greedy as you are, because it keeps us in business.
Well, it's, you talked about them being this music connecting to memory. And I have the same thing where it can be music, it can be film, it can be most of those movies that I have on my wall back there. There's probably 75% of those I will never watch again, but I'll walk past and I'll see a title and it'll just give me that charge of that memory of that thing. And I can remember 100%. The day I saw it. I can remember, who I was with, what theater I was there. I can hear a piece of music and it'll take me back to when I was in 8th grade and I was riding my bike and I skinned my knee, whatever the memory happens to be.
That's awesome.
It's that visceral kind of thing that you can have around art that you can get connected to. And you're giving that to a lot of people, man.
I love it. I appreciate that. I'm a creative person, right? That's how I see myself. That's how I like to be. It's like breathing to me. And so and you say you're a writer as well. So I write music as well. And these liner notes have been a real honor again to write. And for me, it's from the heart, and so even though I said it keeps us in business, for me, it allows me to keep just to be able to curate this, like put the track order and talk about it. And I'll never get tired about talking about this stuff because I'm fascinated by the craft of composition, how this man wrote. There's not much known. I tried to glean as much as I could from the Sidemen. There were some little secrets I heard about how he played the B section of Linus and Lucy from Stuart McCain, and that he would slam his hand on the white keys and roll up to the black keys as a very physical thing to create that particular sound when he played it live and maybe on some of the recordings. And so that's the stuff, man. That's the thick of it. That's where I am like, I'm so blessed and fortunate to be able to work on this stuff.
Well, it's kind of, you can just start sharing those stories again, in the way that the Linus and Lucy story about how they would play it live and recontextualize it in a way that people didn't even know they were playing it and that kind of stuff, which I love those bits, man. It's so cool.
The farthest out he goes, and speaking of repurpose, I was talking about repurposing within a special. Linus and Lucy is across, 10 of the 15 specials, not as much in the 70s, but Peppermint Patty, that theme is the most utilized piece of music in the 70s scores that Vince had. But on Be My Valentine, there's one that was called Linus and Lucy. Even I studied music intensively and studied Guaraldi. It's barely it's a thread of Linus and Lucy, maybe at the C section. What's fascinating is he only used on these recordings, the Linus and Lucy on this is the football trick during the episode.
Yeah.
And so it's a bowl. You might have seen in the liner notes. The football is like the cape. Charlie Brown is the bowl, and Lucy is the matador. And the sound is a paso doble. It's the Spanish sound version of dun, 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 but it's to the C section, the bridge section of Linus and Lucy. And I didn't know that until the fifth time I heard it. I was like, why did he choose to do this really obscure random version? And like you said, when he played it in clubs, Mark Rosengarten specifically, who played on this album, said he would play it 5 different ways within the same time frame, and then even come back and play it a second and third time of the night. So Linus and Lucy's it goes everywhere. It goes all over the place.
It's the improvisational nature of jazz is something that I really react to, that I love it. And I don't think it's something that's for everybody, but there's that playfulness and that sense of humor that jazz can have in a way that other forms of music don't necessarily do. And I think there is that expectation for you to be that engaged with the music, not just waiting for the hits, that you are there's a higher expectation of your audience in a jazz club than there is in other venues.
And for those who don't just want the 1.5-minute versions, we do have there's a Last Call for Love, a 4.5-minute bonus track we found on a session. They must have just laid it down at the end of a Peanuts session, and it's on our Valentine record, Be My Valentine, Charlie Brown. So that's a cool thing to point out. And I think that particular album is the longest one at present. It's 42 minutes long because there's all this bonus material that they did it in a different meter. It didn't end up in the show. And it's sometimes I prefer it to what ended up in the special. And talk about fun. You can hear that he's just playing with these themes and I'm going to try this. And you even hear, there's 2 specials where you hear Vince's voice. I'll let people find the second one, but one is on Freddie's Mood on Be My Valentine. He goes, 1 minute coming up. And it's in the actual special. If we turn the volume all the way up, it's about a minute into this puppet show where he's playing Chopin, qualifying Chopin. And so obviously they're just laid back and they're doing whatever. And you hear it between tracks sometimes. That's why we like to include them talking, because these are just guys having a good time on a Tuesday, That's
so great. I love that. That's fantastic. And I think that this music will continue to be talked about for another 50 years. It's just something that's going to outlive both of us. This is something that I think really will be timeless. And there's not many things of pop culture that really resonate and stand the test of time like that. Most of the stuff is forgotten within a generation. And I think that it just speaks to all this work, that it's still, I have a 9-year-old who is well aware of this world and wants to revisit it. So And
the first time my brother and I heard a tape, and this is probably the thing I've said more than anything else in the press, the blood drained from my face because it felt sacred, like Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom finding that artifact, right? So when we heard his voice and we heard Bill Melendez and John Scott Trotter, the conductor, and they're working out. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away, because this is my brother's favorite album that we haven't put out yet. But they're working out themes that everybody knows. It's like seeing how the sausage is made, how the magic trick is done, but in a way that you're not feeling like you're taking away from the sanctity of music listening. And my kids too, they're getting into the new music too and appreciating it in a way. And what's great is, it feels like and I don't mean this to be morbid, like we're raising the dead in a most positive way. Yeah. And my brother and I also, with David Benoit, we produced a symphony. We premiered it in Santa Rosa called Playing for Peanuts in 2022. And this Christmas time, December 2021, they're doing all these cues, probably 20 different cues that aren't just Christmas in the first half, that are Vince Guaraldi Peanuts cues that David has arranged in symphonic ways. And I, again, afforded the opportunity to work with him closely and navigate it. And we're so excited because next year that we're hopefully going to, at least a couple spots, if not more, going to be touring with the symphonic versions of this. And then there's, of course, the stage production of Charlie Brown Christmas that's touring all over the country in the coming months. So there's just so many different ways that kids and families can appreciate this music. You talk about your 9-year-old 10-year-old. So we're trying to think outside the box, like you said, about how to get this music out to the world, you know?
Well, I took him to a screening of Raiders of the Lost Ark with the symphony, and he was floored by that. So
I love that. I did the same thing with Harry Potter and my son.
It's kind of the gateway to classical music and going to these other things. You can't just start them with that. You have to kind of introduce. You have to dip your toes in the water to see if it's appropriate. So
I think what's crazy, man, is on some of these social media platforms, people I'd never imagined, teenagers and tweens and 20-somethings who you can tell have never maybe even listened to the record on the record player yet or haven't listened to jazz. They're spinning the egg. Sometimes you talk about the 45. There's some people spinning the 45 at 33 and having to learn. Oh, they're like posting it. It's getting 1,000 likes. And I'm like, no, they're playing a good sport Charlie Brown at the wrong speed and they think it sounds good. I can't wait for them to hear it being played at the right speed.
So there's a 45 of Dolly Parton's Jolene. And if you listen to it at 33, it sounds like a man singing it, and it's a beautiful song. So sometimes you can
I love that.
You can trip if you go on YouTube.
I will do that.
Look for Dolly Parton Jolene at 33 and a third, and you will hear it, and it's pretty remarkable, actually. It's pretty great.
I will do that right after we're done here, Chris, for sure.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, man. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on the record, and congratulations on all the records coming out, because I really think that there is a need for these, and I'm really glad that you're filling that, man.
Thank you for having me on, Chris. I appreciate your enthusiasm, your thoughtful questions, and I totally agree that when we're putting something out that's, innocent and pure and fun, it really combats anything that's, negative in the world. So I feel really great about that. Again,